chapter 26 of The Secret Garden. This one is called Its Mother. Its Mother. Their belief in the magic was an abiding thing. After the morning's incantations, Colin sometimes gave them magic lectures. I like to do it, he explained, because when I grow up and make great scientific discoveries, I shall be obliged to lecture about them, and so this is practice. I can only give short lectures now because I am very young, and besides, Ben Weatherstaff would feel as if he were in church and he would go to sleep. The best thing about lecturing, said Ben, is that a chap can get up and say aught he pleases, and no other chap can answer him back. I wouldn't be again lecturing a bit myself sometimes. But when Colin held forth under his tree, old Ben fixed devouring eyes on him and kept them there. He looked him over with much critical affection. It was not so much the lecture which interested him as the legs, which looked straighter and stronger every day, the boyish head which held itself up so well, and the once sharp chin, hollow cheeks which had filled out and rounded out, and the eyes which had begun to hold the light he remembered in another pair. Sometimes when Colin felt Ben's earnest gaze meant that he had much impressed, he wondered what he was reflecting on, and once when he had seemed quite entranced, he questioned him. "What are you thinking about, Ben Weatherstaff?" he asked. "I was thinking," answered Ben, "as I'd warrant tha's gone up 3 or 4 pounds this week. I was looking at the calves and the shoulders, and I'd like to get the pair of scales. It's the magic, and Mrs. Sowerby's buns and milk and things," said Colin. "You see, the scientific experiment succeeded." That morning, Dickon was too late to hear the lecture. When he came, he was ruddy with running, and his funny face looked more twinkling than usual. As they had a good deal of weeding to do after the rains, they fell to work. They always had plenty to do after a warm, deep, sinking rain. The moisture which was good for the flowers was also good for the weeds, which thrust up tiny blades of grass and points of leaves which must be pulled up before their roots took too firm a hold. Colin was as good at weeding as anyone in these days, and he could lecture while he was doing it. "The magic works best when you work yourself," he said this morning. "You can feel it in your bones and muscles. I'm going to read books about bones and muscles, but I'm going to write a book about magic. I'm making it up now. I keep finding out things." It was not very long after he had said this that he had laid down his trowel and stood up on his feet. He had been silent for several minutes, and they had seen that he was thinking out lectures, as he often did. When he dropped his trowel and stood upright, it seemed to Mary and Dickon as if a sudden strong thought had made him do it. He stretched himself out to his tallest height, and he threw out his arm exultantly. Colour glowed in his face, and his strange eyes widened with joyfulness. All at once he had realised something to the full. "Mary, Dickon," he cried, "just look at me." They stopped their weeding and looked at him. "Do you remember that first morning you brought me in here?" he demanded. Dickon was looking at him very hard. Being an animal charmer, he could see more things than most people could, and many of them were things he never talked about. He saw some of them now in this boy. "Aye, that we do," he answered. Mary looked hard too, but she said nothing. "Just this minute," said Colin. "All at once I remembered it myself, when I looked at my hand digging with the trowel, and I had to stand up on my feet to see if it was real. And it is real. I'm well. I'm well." "Aye, that thy art," said Dickon. I'm well," said Colin again, and his face went quite red all over. He had known it before in a way. He had hoped it, and felt it, and thought about it. But just at that minute something had brushed all through him, a sort of rapturous belief and realization, and it had been so strong that he could not help calling out. "I shall live forever and ever and ever," he said grandly. "I shall find out thousands and thousands of things. I shall find out about people and creatures and everything that grows, like Dickon, and I shall never stop making magic. I'm well, I'm well. I feel as if I want to shout out something thankful, something joyful. Ben Weatherstaff, who had been working near a rosebush, glanced round at him. They might sing the doxology, he suggested in his driest grunt. He had no opinion of the doxology, and he did not make the suggestion with any particular reverence. But Colin was of an exploring mind, and he knew nothing about doxology. What is that? He inquired. Dickon can sing it for thee, I'll warrant, replied Ben Weatherstaff. Dickon answered with his animal charmer's smile. They sing it at church, he said. Mother says she believes the skylark sings it when they gets up in the morning. If she says that, it must be a nice song, Colin answered. I've never been in a church myself. I was always too ill. Sing it, Dickon. I want to hear it. Dickon was quite simple and unaffected about it. He understood what Colin felt better than Colin did himself. He understood by a sort of instinct so natural that he did not know it was understanding. He pulled off his cap and looked round, still smiling. Thou must take off the cap, he said to Colin. And so must the Ben. And then must stand up, the nose. Colin took off his cap and the sun shone on and warmed his thick hair as he watched Dickon intently. Ben Weatherstaff scrambled up from his knees and bared his head too, with a sort of puzzled, half-resentful look on his old face, as if he didn't know exactly why he was doing this remarkable thing. Dickon stood out among the trees and rose bushes and began to sing in quite a simple, matter-of-fact way and in a nice, strong boy voice. When he had finished, Ben Weatherstaff was standing quite still with his jaws set obstinately, but with a disturbed look in his eyes fixed on Colin. Colin's face was thoughtful and appreciative. It is a very nice song, he said. I like it. Perhaps it means just what I mean when I want to shout out that I am thankful to the magic. He stopped and thought in a puzzled way. Perhaps they are both the same thing. How can we know the exact names of everything? Sing it again, Dickon. Let us try, Mary. I want to sing it too. It's my song. How does it begin? And they sang it again, and Mary and Colin lifted their voices as musically as they could, and Dickon swelled quite loud and beautiful, and at the second line Ben Weatherstaff raspingly cleared his throat, and at the third he joined in with such vigour that it seemed almost savage. Mary observed that the very same thing had happened to him which had happened when he found out that Colin was not a cripple. His chin was twitching and he was staring and winking and his leathery old cheeks were wet. I never seed no sense in the doxology afore, he said hoarsely, but I may change my mind in time. I should say they've gone up £5 this week, Maester Colin. 5 on 'em. Colin was looking across the garden at something attracting his attention, and his expression had become a startled one. Who is coming in here? He said quickly. Who is it? The door in the ivied wall had been pushed gently open and a woman had entered. She had come in with the last line of their song, and she had stood still listening and looking at them, with the ivy behind her and the sunlit light drifting through the trees and dappling her long blue cloak, the trees, and her nice fresh face smiling across the greenery. She was rather like a softly coloured illustration in one of Colin's books. She had wonderful affectionate eyes which seemed to take everything in, all of them, even Ben Weatherstaff and the creatures and every flower that was in bloom. Unexpectedly, as she had appeared, not one of them felt that she was an intruder at all. Dickon's eyes lighted like lamps. And we shall continue tomorrow with the second half of chapter 26. I wonder